We talk a lot about bad PC ports fairly often, but what about consoles? There's more than a few bad ones there. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, the 10 worst console ports. Just a quick disclaimer, we're only going to talk about games that were released in the last 10 years because this era is the era people should have known better at the highest rate. You go back, yeah, people should have known better about bad ports, but more recently, there's even less of an excuse. Number 10 is Fallout New Vegas on the PlayStation 3. I think that some of the reasons why Fallout New Vegas had an issue on the PS3, you'll see again on this very same list. But Fallout New Vegas uses the Gamebryo engine, although it was developed by Obsidian and was actually a different process from pretty much every other Bethesda game, being it wasn't developed by Bethesda, it still uses that damn engine. And on the PS3, there's a divided memory pool, which is very restrictive. They were very happy with the Xbox 360's handling of RAM, for instance, which gave them 512 megs of RAM at any given time. The PS3 has the same amount of RAM, but it allots 256 megabytes for the system and only 256 for the graphics, meaning there's some interesting problems there. Basically, half of the RAM is just totally unusable for any graphics, which is not good, especially if you consider the way that Fallout New Vegas handles items in the world. As you play the game, items on tables, or items in chests, or containers, or characters, all of the locations change and that data has to be saved. And the bigger that save file gets, the more of a problem that is with such a limited amount of memory because that save file constantly lives in the memory before you save it. It is the state of the game. And therefore, as you play the game, you need all of the data within this file, and as the file gets bigger and bigger, the game can use less and less memory. On the PS3, it's out of a pool of about half of the memory as it is on competitive platforms, which is not just bad, it's like terrible. Now, I've spent a long time detailing this because there's other games on this list that have this exact problem, and I wanted you to understand it in full. Number 9 is PUBG, which, wow, it does not run very good on the Xbox One X. Or at least hasn't. I mean, it's better than it was, but it's not exactly something that was built to be scaled to console. PUBG uses effects, it has a lot of people on screen at once, it has a lot of stuff going on at once, and it really doesn't attempt to sacrifice any of the fidelity of any of this, which is actually to its detriment because it tanks pretty bad when there's a firefight going on. I will note that with the disclaimer that I haven't played it in a while, and the last I did play it, it had gotten better, but I also still see people complain about it, so I assume it's not at least at Fortnite level, I guess. Epic was really smart going for a cartoony graphic style with that, because it even runs decent on Nintendo Switch, so. Number 8 is Shadow of Mordor on PS3, which, why is there a version of that game on PS3? Obviously, it came out first for PS4 and Xbox One, but it's not even close. It's not even close. Like, you can't pretend that it's going to look as good as the current generation version of the game, but it looks worse than most previous generation games. And it runs bad. The graphics are so bad they affect the gameplay, and that's when you know there's a serious problem. They don't even perform like the same game, because nothing responds in the way that it's supposed to in the older generation games. It's just horrible. Number 7 is Dragon Age Inquisition on the Xbox 360, which again, why? Like, I understand they want to make the money off of the people who played on Xbox 360 still in 2014, but it is garbage. And I say this because I actually bought it on Xbox 360 before I bought a new console way back then. And it made me hate the game. Like, it was that bad. Like, the frame rate was so low, the textures were so undetailed and oftentimes not even there for a long time. The character models were really low res to the point where sometimes they were even unrecognizable. And I understand that it's because it was built for next gen consoles and they had to try to downgrade it to work on previous gen consoles, but why do that? Like, I understand, like, you wanted my money, and you got my money. You got my money twice. So from a business perspective, believe me, I totally understand why do this. But as a human being, as somebody who understands what it's like to feel. Why would you do this? This of course leads you to ask the question, was it developed by human beings who know what it's like to feel? Number 6, any console version of Payday 2. It's interesting because they have connection issues. Because of a certain glitch, you're actually not able to pick up health or ammo in certain instances, which obviously is a huge problem in a game that depends heavily on the dynamics of picking up health and ammo. But there's also tons of issues with objectives just flat out disappearing into thin air, or you know how you can break walls? Well, it's not always like that on consoles, and they more or less just abandoned it in that state. It's terrible. It's just a disgrace. Number 5 is Skyrim on the PS3, which, oh my god, Skyrim on the PS3. Now, Todd Howard says it's not anything to do with what we talked about with Fallout New Vegas on the PS3. He said it was a common misconception that it was due to large save files and memory issues. He actually said it was because what spells you have hotkeyed, and I want to say that it's possible that that certainly contributed in some way, but I also want to say that Todd Howard is full of shit. I'm sorry, you made a new engine called Creation Engine, which is actually still Gamebryo, but different. It's a fork of Gamebryo. And the PlayStation 3's memory didn't suddenly get bigger or better. And I know you guys are still saving various locations of items in the game, making the save file larger and larger. I'm not pretending that there aren't other issues, it's just I know you still have that issue. As that save file gets bigger and as the world is modified and as you have to have more data in the RAM at all times, you have less RAM that you can use for the graphics, and the graphics get worse. And you're still using this engine in Fallout 76, guys. I know that Fallout 76 isn't limited by the PlayStation 3's RAM situation, because it's not on the PlayStation 3, but still, they don't care. That's mainly what I'm implying here. They'll just basically say whatever. Number 4 is Strafe on PS4, which is basically a little bit better now. They added load screens between levels instead of just letting you go into a new area and have it load and kill that frame rate. When it launched, it was a mess. Honestly, it's not a lot better, but you couldn't even go into some areas of the game without the frame rate dropping so low. It was genuinely unplayable, which is, for a PlayStation 4 game nowadays, shouldn't happen. Really just any console game nowadays. You're talking about developing on a closed platform, there aren't as many variables to deal with, and yet they put this out. Number 3 is the PlayStation 3 port of Bayonetta, which was desperately mishandled. Platinum Games did not know how to develop on the PlayStation 3, so they handed the port of Bayonetta over to Sega, who published the game. And Sega is Sega. They have talented people, but I don't know really what is up with Sega. They're very inconsistent. And so is the Bayonetta PS3 port. The loading times were ridiculous. There was tons of slowdown, and although this stuff was eventually fixed to some degree with a patch, Sony patched the game. People who were not involved in the development or the publishing of the game patched the game officially. It was that bad. Number 2 is WWE 2K18 for the Nintendo Switch, which with the Nintendo Switch, when you make a port of a current gen game, there are sacrifices to be made. The Nintendo Switch is a very different console. It's not as if it has a bad GPU or anything, but it is certainly low power and deals with some bandwidth issues that the other consoles just don't. It's part of the nature of the console, the way it was designed in order to be both a portable and a home console, just puts it in that position. And if you port a game to the Nintendo Switch, it needs to be done very carefully, adapting to all of the various specifics. And it has been done with great effect. See Doom 2016 and the Wolfenstein port. They're great. They're phenomenal even. It's amazing that you can play that on a portable. WWE 2K18 does not take that route. It is very bad. It's basically just a port, and they didn't do a lot in order to optimize it for the Switch, and when it loses frames, instead of doing the thing that most games do now, which is skip frames, WWE 2K18 instead slows down. So if the frame rate slows down, the game slows down. It still renders all the frames that it would have, it just plays them for you slower, which means you get slow motion, which is bad because it really messes up the gameplay for WWE 2K18. And finally, number 1 is Ark Survival Evolved, which just is ridiculously bad. Or at least was, I don't know. A lot of the issues really didn't get addressed too much though. It came out to PS4 and Xbox One and, well, had a terrible frame rate. Pretty much all the time. Like, people reported frame rates as low as like 14 frames per second in a consistent manner, which is pretty bad considering it's a 720p game in a generation of games that are very often 1080p. It also has really bad visual tearing, which is something that we see less and less of in games as they, realize it bothers people. Not in Ark though. And there's also a Switch version, but there's no point in even mentioning the Switch version. It's such a mess. There's so much work that needs to be done with Ark, but I don't know. It's one of those games that leaves a sour feeling in your mouth because of how it runs. Any other games like that for you? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, click like. And if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. So click the subscribe button and do not forget to click the alarm bell. That'll give you notifications as we upload new videos every day. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.